today we're going to use our trig functions to solve triangles. So solving a triangle means finding all missing angles and sides. The first thing we want to make sure we do is get our calculator in the correct mode, because your calculator always defaults to radians. So you want to, on your calculator, you want to hit the mode button and it brings up a menu, and you want to make sure that degree is highlighted. So I'm going to go down to degree, over to the right, and hit enter, and make sure that it's highlighted, because otherwise you're going to get different answers. Okay, so now to exit, we can clear out. Okay, so make sure that you have that set. Okay, out of order. Okay, so when I solve a triangle, I'm going to use my trig function. So this one just says solve for essentially the missing piece. So in this case, I'm just missing x. So I look at the angle measure I have, which is this one, and I look at the side measures I have in relation to it. So let's say theta is here. I've got this side adjacent, and I have the hypotenuse. So I have to think which trig function uses adjacent and hypotenuse, and it's cosine. So I'm going to write this like I would, except now I know the angle measure. So I'm going to say cosine of 35 degrees equals the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Okay, so now I need to solve for x. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this over 1, and I'm going to cross multiply. So I've got 14 times 1 is 14. X times cosine is x times cosine 35. Now these move together, these don't separate. So if I'm solving for x, this is being multiplied, so I'm going to divide by cosine of 35 on both sides. Okay, so I'm going to put this in my calculator, so those cancel because it's 1, and I'm going to put this in my calculator. So I'm going to do 14 divided by, and then right here's, right here's our cosine button, just above the parentheses, so cosine of 35 degrees, and then close our parenthesis, and we get a side length of, and we're going to round to the hundredth, so we're going to go 2 decimal places, so it'll be 17.09. So 17.09. So there is my missing side length. Okay, let's try another. So this one, I'm trying to find the angle measure. So, excuse me, when I look for an angle measure, I'm going to go through the same process. So I've got the side opposite, and I've got the hypotenuse. So the trig function that uses opposite and hypotenuse is sine. So I'm going to write sine of theta equals opposite side over hypotenuse. Now if you notice, the thing I'm solving for is theta, and it's a part of sine. So sine is a function, it's something that we do to a number. So to take the inverse, we use, or to solve for theta, to get theta away from sine, we can't divide because you can't separate sine and theta without doing the inverse. So we have what's called an inverse sine, and it is a button on your calculator. If you look just above your like sine, cosine, theta, there's a sine and a little -1, cosine -1, tangent -1. That's called inverse. So I'm going to do that. So you only do this when you want an angle measure. So I'm going to do sine inverse of 10/15 equals theta. So it switches your theta and your fraction. So I'm going to put this in my calculator. So I hit second sine, and then I'm going to do 10 divided by 15, close my parentheses, and hit enter, and it will give me an angle measure. So this is theta equals, and again 2 decimal places, so 41.81 degrees. Okay, so we use inverse whenever we're finding an angle measure. Okay, let's try a couple more. Okay. All right, so here I'm solving for x. I have an angle, so let's look at what we have. We have the side opposite our angle, and we have the side adjacent to our angle. So the function that uses opposite and adjacent would be tangent. So I've got tangent of 32 equals the opposite side over the adjacent side, which is 13. So again, put this over 1 and cross multiply. So I've got 1 times x is just x. 13 times tangent is 13 times tangent 32. So x is by itself, so it's really solved for. I just have to figure out what this is. So I'm going to put that in my calculator. So tangent, 13 times tangent 32 is 8.12. So there's that missing side length. Okay, let's do another angle. So we're trying to find theta here. So let's look at what we have in relation. So this side is adjacent. This is the hypotenuse to theta. So the trig function that uses adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So I've got cosine of theta, because I don't know the angle, equals adjacent over hypotenuse. So whenever you're trying to find an angle measure, this is where we use inverse. So we've got cosine inverse of our fraction equals theta. So now let's put that in our calculator. So I'm going to hit second cosine to get that little -1 there. And then I'm going to type in my 4/9, so 4 divided by 9. Close it, hit enter, and I've got 63.61 degrees. Okay. All right. So, an important part about solving a triangle is knowing like what goes where. Angles are always represented by capital letters, so it doesn't matter where they go. Let's call this A, let's call this B, and we'll call this C. So these are angle A, angle B, angle C. And then the side across from that angle is labeled with the lowercase version. So this side would be lowercase a, this would be lowercase b, and then this would be lowercase c. Okay. Okay, so we're going to solve some triangles here. So when we solve triangles, we are finding all the missing information. So if you look, I don't know what the measure of angle A is. B is 28, so let's fill that in. C is 90. Side A is 15. And I don't know B or C. Okay. So a third angle is easy to find because I know that all the angles add to 180. So I can take 180 minus 90 minus 28, and my leftovers will be my angle measure. So if you do 180 minus 90 minus 28, you get 62 degrees. So there's one part of my missing piece, so that's 62. Okay. So now from here, I'm going to have to use a trig function to figure out one of my side lengths. So I can use 28, or now I could use 62 if I want. I'm going to use 28. So I know I have to use the adjacent side because that's the only side I have information on. So from here, I could either try and find the hypotenuse, or I could try and find the side opposite. It's honestly whichever one you want to find first. I'm going to find B first. So this is opposite. So just like we were doing before, the trig function that uses opposite adjacent is tangent. So I've got tangent of 28 equals the side opposite, which is B, over adjacent, which is 15. So put this over 1 and cross multiply. So that's 1 times B is B, 15 times tangent 28. So B's already solved for. I just need to put this in my calculator. So if you put 15 times tangent 28 in your calculator, I got 7.98. So that's side B. Okay, so let's just label. From here, you have two options. Because it's a right triangle, I can use Pythagorean theorem. So I can do this squared plus this squared equals this squared and get my side C. Or I could use trig again and say use adjacent and hypotenuse and use cosine. So it's completely up to you. I'm going to do Pythagorean theorem. So I've got 7.98 squared plus 15 squared equals C squared. So 7.98 squared plus 15 squared is 288.68. And then I'm going to square root that. And I get 16.99. And so I have solved all the parts of my triangle. Okay, let's try another. All right. So for this one, let's see. I know angle C is 90 degrees. I'm missing side B. Side C is 35. Side A is 24. So right off the bat, I've got two sides of a triangle. So I could use Pythagorean theorem to find the missing side. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So I've got 24 squared plus B squared equals 35 squared. So once I do this and subtract, I end up with 649. And when I square root that, I get a decimal. So I got 25.48 for side B. Okay, so 24 or 25.48 for B. Okay, I'm not going to go through all of Pythagorean theorem because we did that yesterday. Okay, so now from here, I just need to find one angle measure because then I can do my 180 minus 90 minus that. So let's look at our options because I could find really any of these. Let's find angle B first. So if I'm finding angle B, this is the side adjacent and this is the hypotenuse to angle B. So the trig function that uses adjacent and hypotenuse is cosine. So that's cosine of angle B equals adjacent over hypotenuse. So since I'm finding an angle measure, I'm going to do inverse. So cosine inverse of 24 over 35 equals B. So I put that in my calculator and I got 46.71 degrees. Okay, so remember that in our calculator, that's second cosine to get that little -1 of 24 divided by 38. And there's, 35, sorry. Second cosine 24 divided by 35 is 46.71. So I rounded up there. Okay, and then to get this third side, I'm going to do 180 minus 90 minus 46.71, and I get 43.29 degrees. Because remember, these have to add to 180, so I can take 180 and subtract out the 2. So here is all the parts of my triangle. Okay. Okay, so why don't you try the next two? I'm going to stop the video here and I will put another video up showing the examples of the other ones, but I would try these first before you watch the other video.